You've been told you need full sun to grow vegetables in that shady corner of your yard. Just accept it as wasted space. But what if I told you that some of the most delicious, productive crops actually prefer the cool refuge of shade, especially during those brutal summer months when your sun-drenched beds are struggling? Hey there, garden friends. If you're finding value in what we're exploring today, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button and tapping the bell so you never miss our weekly growing tips. Let's start with something that might completely change how you think about that shaded area along your fence line. Lettuce is the gateway crop for shade gardening, and once you understand why it thrives there, you'll never waste your sunniest spots on it again. This leafy green actually suffers in intense heat, bolting to seed the moment temperatures climb into the 80s and 90s, which happens across most of the country from June through August. In partial shade, especially afternoon shade, lettuce stays sweet and productive weeks longer than its sun-scorched cousins. You can grow loose leaf varieties like oak leaf or buttercrunch in spots that receive just 3 to 4 hours of morning sun, and they'll reward you with tender leaves all season long. The key is consistent moisture, since shade helps retain water in the soil, meaning you're actually working less to keep these plants happy. Plant successive crops every 2 weeks from early spring through fall, and you'll have fresh salads even when your neighbor's lettuce patch looks like a crispy brown wasteland. Here's something most gardeners miss. Shade-grown lettuce develops deeper, more complex flavors because it's not stressed by heat. The leaves grow larger and more succulent, with that perfect snap when you bite into them. Are you still wasting your prime sunny real estate on lettuce? Or are you ready to let it find its happy place in the shadows? Now here's a crop that surprises almost everyone when they discover it's actually a shade lover. Spinach is one of those vegetables that seems delicate but is incredibly tough when given the right conditions, and those conditions definitely include protection from harsh afternoon sun. This powerhouse green is a cool season champion that can handle frost better than heat, making it perfect for those spots under deciduous trees in spring and fall or in the permanent shade cast by buildings or tall shrubs. Across the Midwest and Northeast, you can plant spinach in early spring when the soil is barely workable, tucking it into those shaded zones where snow melts last, and it'll be your first harvest of the year. The beauty of growing spinach in shade is that it simply doesn't bolt as quickly. While sun-grown spinach rushes to flower the moment temperatures hit 70 degrees, your shade-grown plants keep producing those gorgeous dark green leaves well into early summer. Water deeply once or twice a week, depending on your soil, and mulch around the plants to keep roots cool and moist. In southern states where summers arrive early and stay late, afternoon shade is absolutely essential if you want any spring spinach harvest at all. Add compost before planting because spinach is a heavy feeder, and side dress with a balanced organic fertilizer midway through the growing season. One fascinating detail: shade-grown spinach has measurably higher concentrations of certain nutrients because the plant isn't spending all its energy trying to cope with heat stress. What's your experience been with spinach? Does it bolt on you before you can harvest a decent amount? Here's where things get really interesting, and I'm talking about a vegetable that most people assume needs blazing sun because they picture it growing in massive commercial fields. Broccoli actually performs beautifully in partial shade, especially in regions where summers get intense. This cool season brassica develops tighter, more flavorful heads when it's protected from the hottest part of the day. If you've ever grown broccoli in full sun during a warm spring, you've probably watched those heads open up into loose, bitter flowers almost overnight. That's heat stress, and shade prevents it. In the cooler Pacific Northwest, broccoli thrives in spots with dappled light filtering through fruit trees, while in Texas or Georgia, that afternoon shade becomes absolutely critical for getting any harvest at all. Plant broccoli transplants rather than seeds for better success, spacing them about 18 inches apart in rich, well-amended soil. These plants need consistent moisture, so the water-retaining properties of shaded soil work in your favor. Watch for cabbage worms, those little green caterpillars that love brassicas, and hand-pick them or use row covers for protection. Here's a pro tip that changes everything. When you harvest the main head, leave the plant in place because it'll produce smaller side shoots for weeks afterward, giving you an extended harvest from a single planting. The flavor of shade-grown broccoli is noticeably sweeter and less bitter than sun-stressed plants. Have you noticed a difference in taste between your spring and summer brassicas? Let's talk about something that might seem completely counterintuitive. Peas, those climbing spring beauties, actually appreciate afternoon shade more than you'd think. While they do need some direct light to flower and set pods, too much heat causes the plants to stop producing and the pods to become tough and starchy. In southern states, peas are really a late winter and early spring crop, finished before summer heat arrives. But even there, eastern or northern exposures with limited afternoon sun extend the harvest. Further north, in places like Minnesota or Maine, you can grow peas well into June if they're protected from the hottest part of the day. The vines will climb a trellis or fence beautifully, creating a living screen while producing sweet, crisp pods that taste nothing like the grocery store version. Sow seeds directly in the ground as soon as soil can be worked, pushing them about an inch deep and 2 inches apart. Peas fix nitrogen in the soil through their root nodules, which means they're actually improving your garden as they grow. When you pull spent pea plants at the end of the season, chop them up and work them back into the soil rather than composting them, you're giving future crops a nitrogen boost. Mulch around the base of pea plants helps keep roots cool, which is exactly what they want. One thing that surprises people, sugar snap and snow peas handle shade even better than shelling peas, staying sweet and tender longer into the warming season. What's your favorite way to eat fresh peas straight from the garden? Now, here's a crop that's been cultivated for thousands of years and has always preferred the cool, moist conditions that shade provides. Arugula is a peppery salad green that grows so fast you'll barely believe it, going from seed to harvest in just 3 to 4 weeks under the right conditions. This Mediterranean native has adapted beautifully to American gardens from coast to coast, but it turns bitter and bolts to seed almost immediately in hot, sunny conditions. Give arugula a shaded spot with morning sun or dappled light all day, and it becomes one of the most productive greens in your garden. The flavor stays mild and nutty, rather than becoming harsh and overpowering. Scatter seeds directly in the garden bed and barely cover them with soil, keeping the area consistently moist until germination, which usually happens within a week. You can start harvesting when leaves are just a few inches tall, and the plant will keep producing new growth from the center. In fact, this cut-and-come-again approach works so well that a small patch of arugula can feed a family all season long. Planted in spring and again in late summer for fall harvests, as it actually grows better in the cooling days of autumn than in the warming days of spring. Here's something incredible. Arugula flowers are edible too, with a spicy kick that adds drama to salads, and pollinators absolutely love them. Succession planting every 2 weeks gives you a constant supply without overwhelming you with too much at once. Does the peppery bite of arugula appeal to you, or do you prefer milder salad greens? Let me share something that absolutely shocked me when I first discovered it. Kale, that trendy superfood that seems to be everywhere now, is actually one of the most shade-tolerant vegetables you can grow. This hardy brassica not only survives in partial shade, it actually produces more tender, less bitter leaves there. Full sun kale can become tough and overly strong-flavored, especially during the heat of summer, while shade-grown kale stays sweet and succulent. Kale thrives in cool weather and can handle frost beautifully. In fact, many gardeners swear the flavor improves after a light freeze. You can grow varieties like lacinato, also called dinosaur kale, or the curly types like winterbore, in areas that receive 4 to 5 hours of sun. Plant transplants or direct seed in early spring or late summer, spacing them about 12 to 18 inches apart to allow for their eventual size. Kale is a cut-and-come-again crop, meaning you harvest the lower leaves as the plant continues growing upward, producing new foliage from the top. Water consistently, but don't overdo it, as kale is surprisingly drought-tolerant once established, and the moisture retention in shaded soil helps immensely. In warmer climates across the South, kale is primarily a fall, winter, and early spring crop. But that afternoon shade can extend your harvest by several weeks before the heat finally wins. Add a layer of compost around plants mid-season to keep them fed and happy. Here's the fascinating part. A single kale plant can produce for months, even through winter in mild areas, giving you harvests when almost nothing else is growing. Have you tried growing kale through the colder months, or does your season end in fall? Here's something that might bust a myth you've held for years. Cilantro, that herb everyone either loves or despises, is actually terrible in full sun because it bolts to seed faster than you can blink. This herb is the definition of a cool season crop that desperately needs protection from heat. In shaded conditions, cilantro stays in its leafy phase much longer, giving you weeks of fresh harvests instead of days. The moment cilantro experiences heat stress, it shoots up a flower stalk and the leaves turn bitter and sparse. Grow it in morning sun with afternoon shade or in the dappled light under taller plants, and you'll finally understand why people rave about fresh cilantro. Direct seeded in spring as soon as soil is workable, or in late summer for a fall crop that often lasts until hard frost. In the Southwest, where temperatures spike early, shade is the only way to get any cilantro harvest at all during the growing season. Keep the soil evenly moist but not waterlogged, and harvest leaves regularly to encourage bushier growth. If it does bolt, don't despair. Let it flower and go to seed, because those seeds are coriander, a wonderful spice for cooking. One trick that works brilliantly, plant cilantro in containers that you can move to shadier spots as seasons change, giving you complete control over its environment. Do you find yourself struggling to keep cilantro from bolting, or have you given up on growing it altogether? Now we're getting into something that will completely transform your thinking about shade gardening. Beets are root vegetables that most people assume need full blazing sun, but they actually tolerate and even benefit from partial shade, especially in warmer regions. The leafy tops grow lush and full in reduced light, and while the roots might take a bit longer to size up, they develop sweeter, more tender flesh. Without the woodiness that can happen in hot, dry conditions, plant beet seeds directly in the garden and don't be surprised when multiple seedlings sprout from each seed cluster. You'll need to thin them to about 3 inches apart for best root development. Those thinned seedlings are delicious baby greens for salads, so nothing goes to waste. Beets appreciate consistent moisture, and the water-holding capacity of shaded soil means less frequent watering for you. They grow well in spring and fall across most of the country, but in places with intense summer heat, that shade becomes essential for any summer planting. Choose varieties like Detroit Dark Red or Golden for reliable performance. Work compost into the soil before planting because beets are moderate feeders that reward good soil with better yields. Here's what makes beets special in shade. Both the roots and greens are edible, giving you 2 crops from one planting, and the greens actually grow more prolifically in partial shade than in full sun. Are you team roasted beets or team pickled beets, or do you avoid them entirely? I saved one that genuinely surprised me for last, and it's going to change everything you thought you knew about growing your own food in less than perfect conditions. Swiss chard is a leafy green that's related to beets, and it might be the single most shade-tolerant vegetable you can grow while still getting an abundant harvest. This gorgeous plant comes in varieties with stems in brilliant reds, yellows, oranges, and whites, creating an ornamental display that rivals any flower bed while producing massive quantities of nutritious greens. Swiss chard thrives in locations that receive as little as 3 to 4 hours of direct sunlight, and in hot climates, it actually prefers afternoon shade to prevent the leaves from becoming bitter or developing scorch marks. Plant seeds or transplants in spring after the last frost, spacing them about 6 to 8 inches apart, and they'll produce continuously from early summer until hard frost kills them back. In mild winter areas like coastal California or the deep south, chard often grows right through winter. Harvest outer leaves as needed, leaving the center growth point intact, and the plant will keep producing new leaves for months. The flavor is milder and earthier than spinach, with a slightly salty quality that makes it incredibly versatile in the kitchen. Swiss chard tolerates a wide range of soil conditions, but performs best in rich, well-drained soil amended with compost. Water regularly during dry spells, but established plants handle short drought periods remarkably well. Here's the bonus. Deer and rabbits tend to leave chard alone more than other greens, making it a smart choice if wildlife pressure is an issue in your garden. The colorful stems aren't just beautiful, they're edible too, and can be cooked separately like asparagus. What draws you more, the incredible productivity or those stunning rainbow stems? Let's talk about another crop that defies expectations. Radishes are typically thought of as a full-sun, quick-growing spring crop. And while that's true, they also perform surprisingly well in partial shade, especially the slower maturing varieties. Those classic round red radishes might take an extra week to mature in shade, but they develop milder, less spicy flavors and stay crisp longer without becoming pithy and hollow. In areas with hot springs, shade actually prevents radishes from bolting prematurely or becoming unbearably hot and woody. Plant seeds directly in loose, well-drained soil, spacing them about an inch apart and thinning if needed. Radishes are ready to harvest in as little as 3 to 4 weeks in sun or 4 to 6 weeks in partial shade, making them one of the fastest crops you can grow anywhere. They're perfect for succession planting every 2 weeks throughout spring and fall, filling gaps between slower growing crops. Try varieties like French breakfast or Easter egg for beautiful colors and reliable performance. Keep soil consistently moist because uneven watering causes radishes to crack or become overly pungent. Here's something wonderful. Radish greens are edible and delicious, packed with nutrients, and they grow even more abundantly in partial shade than the roots. Toss young radish leaves into salads or saute them like any cooking green. When you plant radishes in shade, you're essentially growing two vegetables at once, roots and greens, both benefiting from the cooler, moister conditions. Have radishes ever surprised you with how fast they grow, or do you find them too spicy for your taste? Here's one more that deserves attention, especially if you're looking for something that produces heavily without demanding perfect conditions. Asian greens like bok choy, Mizuna, and Tatsoi are shade-tolerant powerhouses that bring incredible flavor diversity to your kitchen. These fast-growing brassicas actually prefer cooler temperatures and partial shade, especially during the transition from spring to summer or in early fall. In full sun, during warm weather, they bolt almost immediately, but in shade, they'll produce tender, flavorful leaves for weeks. Bok choy develops those gorgeous white stems and dark green leaves that are staples of stir-fries, while Mizuna offers feathery, mild greens perfect for salads. Tatsoi forms beautiful rosettes of spoon-shaped leaves that taste like a mild mustard. Plant these directly from seed in early spring or late summer, spacing them according to their mature size, usually 4 to 8 inches apart, depending on variety. They grow quickly, often ready to harvest in just 40 to 50 days, and you can take a cut-and-come-again approach with many varieties. Asian greens appreciate consistent moisture and rich soil, so add compost before planting and mulch to retain water. Watch for flea beetles, tiny black insects that chew small holes in leaves. You can protect plants with row covers if they become problematic. The flavor of these greens is complex and interesting, ranging from mild and sweet to peppery and mustardy, adding excitement to any meal. In shadier spots, they grow slower but sweeter, with less of the sharp bite that can develop in stressed plants. Which Asian greens have you tried growing, or are these completely new to you? So there you have it, 12 vegetables that will thrive in those shady spots you thought were useless for food production. From lettuce and spinach to Swiss chard and Asian greens, these crops prove that shade isn't a limitation, but an opportunity to grow food that actually tastes better and produces longer than their sun-stressed counterparts. The truth is, shade gardening opens up entirely new possibilities for growing your own food, especially as summers get hotter and water becomes more precious. Every shaded corner, every spot under a tree, every north-facing bed becomes potential growing space when you understand which crops actually prefer these conditions. Start with just one or two of these vegetables this season and see how they perform in your specific conditions. Pay attention to how much sun your shaded areas actually receive, because even within shade there's variation, and experiment with different crops until you find what works best. The beauty of shade gardening is that it's often less work than full sun gardening, with less watering, less heat stress, and longer harvests that don't require constant succession planting. Which of these vegetables are you most excited to try in your shady spots, and what's been holding you back from using those areas until now? If this video opened your eyes to new possibilities, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with a fellow gardener and consider subscribing for more practical growing tips that actually work in real gardens. Now, get out there and turn that shade into an asset.